so much everyone for joining today. Really excited to go through the Dryad and Zenodo integration, walk through it and answer a whole bunch of questions. So the way that we're going to go about this is Alex and I are going to introduce ourselves, walk through the integration, talk a little bit more about it, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions. While we're going through this, if you have questions, just put them in the chat. And in the chat, we'll be able to monitor those afterwards, and we'll go through that way. So we're just going to run through and then questions, but as they arise, please put them in the chat so that we don't forget and we can get to those after. So kicking it off, I'm going to introduce myself, which is I'm Daniela Lowenberg. I'm the product manager for Dryad, and I'm based at California Digital Library. And I've been working on this integration and launch with my partner over at CERN. Alex, can you introduce yourself as well?
Yes, hello everyone, my name is Alex Ioannidis. I'm the Zenodo product manager here at CERN, and I'm basically, we've been working with Daniela for roughly more than a year for building this integration, as you can hear about.
So for those who may be familiar or not so familiar, Dryad was started by a community of researchers in 2009 who wanted a place specifically for their data to be curated and preserved and archived, and especially connected to journals. And so Dryad is an open source data publishing platform that focuses on data curation, best practices for data. We have integrations with hundreds of journals, and I've worked with many journals and societies, some I see who are on the call today. And we're really focused on the dissemination of data and data reuse. And for those who may not be as familiar, Alex, can you tell us a little bit about Zenodo?
Yes, so Zenodo basically started in 2013 as a CERN and European Commission initiative. And it's basically a catch-all repository for the long tail of research. It's open to all researchers and institutions and from all disciplines. And the idea is that it's focused on sharing and preservation of all these different artifacts of data, software, and anything around, let's say, the research process.
Great. So with that in mind, maybe people are thinking, well, why did we integrate? And so we want to walk through a little bit of that background before showing you the integration. So if we think a little bit about data from the Dryad perspective, we're thinking about how data can be a standalone product, how it can be a reusable piece of research. But we know that data is connected to every other research output. It's kind of the backbone, or if we think about it in terms of the game Scrabble, it's the starter word, and everything can be built off of that. But these pieces are all dependent, and it's really important. And so as a repository focused specifically on data, we were thinking, how can we better support code and software sharing? And so we were looking outward and thinking, who's doing that really well? And Zenodo has long been a leader in code and software publishing. I'm sure many folks know about the GitHub integration and kind of leading the way in open source archiving of code. And so knowing that we had similar values in open source and being mission driven, being an open product, we really found that it was great to work together on this instead of trying to compete and build separately. And so why did we focus specifically on data and software? Well, they're tightly connected and they are dependent on each other. We know that we need to support both data and software, both at Dryad and Zenodo. But we also know that software is different. So Dryad has, since we've always had that narrow scope of data, our license isn't the best fit. We use CC0. We're not giving a separate software citation. We don't have as many features that are built around software and software citation. But we also know that we could have just, changed the license and allowed that to happen. But it's the same reason that data shouldn't be as supporting information files as articles. So every of these research outputs have best practices and those need to be supported. We also want to elevate software. So we know that there's a lot of packages like R scripts that accompany a data set that folks just aren't thinking of as software. And so while we're working closely with URSI and Reza and other initiatives in the software space, we realized This is kind of a way that if we work together with Dryad and Zenodo's two massive research communities, we can drive that culture change towards elevating code and making sure that code is one of the research outputs that's highly valued, just like data. And we can do this best by working together and not competing or trying to build features that are going to take one or the other. And so with that, what does it all look like? So this project was initially funded by the Sloan Foundation. And just before COVID, our teams were able to get together at CERN and really map out what do we think is the best route, so that we were able to use this last year to completely user test and build on and iterate what is it that researchers would use, but what is it that's also beneficial to us as supporters of the research community. So knowing live demos will never go great on a webinar. We are going to do this through screenshots, but we can answer questions and show you to a staging sandbox later if you'd like to try it on your own. But we now have a new tab. So when people are coming into Dryad, regardless of if they're coming from a journal integration or just happened upon Dryad, there's a new tab that says upload your software. And this is a place where folks can put the software either, their R package directly or upload by URL. So if they're living on GitHub or in a server somewhere, then we can bring that over. And we wanted to make this as clean and easy to understand as possible. So when folks go to review before they submit, we also make sure to show them again, these things are going to be at Dryad, these things are going to be at Zenodo, and reiterating that we have those. That also means that we've added a new space in Dryad to choose your license and agreeing to the terms for software. And so a lot of user testing exposed that folks have a lot of difficulty understanding what license is right, especially if it's their first time publishing software. And so we have defaulted to MIT, but we have all licenses available and choose a license as a place for folks if they want more information. I think since we've launched, all have been MIT, but it'll be interesting for us to track going forward. So immediately you can see here, this is something that has not been published yet. These are two screenshots put together, so apologies. In the related works, so in the Dryad metadata, we allow for folks to put in their persistent identifiers for other works related, but we automatically put in the Zenodo DOI that we've reserved, even though it's not published yet. And that's because we want to make it easier for researchers to not have to think, oh, I have this, now I have this DOI. Bundle it up and make it very apparent for the researcher, but for also all users coming to the page. And for those who are familiar with Dryad, we have a peer review URL. So this is an image here of that, which is a randomized URL that when you copy it and then paste it into a new window, we automatically download the data set while the data set is still private. It has not even gone to curation. It's not published. The DOIs are reserved. And so this is a feature we've long had, but what we were able to build with Zenodo is to actually bring in the Zenodo files as well. So that means when journals are looking at things in Dryad now, they're also going to have any software that was uploaded in the file downloadable here. And so this is a way that we can ensure that folks still are trusted in working through the peer review pathways. Of course, this is not required, but it's something that we're really glad to be able to offer to make sure that we can also try and see if folks are peer reviewing data, that they're peer reviewing the code as well. So once it's published, here's one that I've clicked on the files here so you can see a bunch of data files, that the article DOI that they have as we've published it, and the software DOI from Zenodo. And if we click on that, now that it's published, it takes us over to the Zenodo page. And here we can see the Python scripts and the code that were uploaded through our interface. We've now published it at Zenodo. It's brought over the identifier of the article. It's the source of, pointing back to Dryad's DOI. It has the right license, and then all of the metadata was transferred as well. And so that is the basis of this integration, which is that researchers now can come through Dryad, not have to think more other than uploading, and we can do this better practice for them instead of us publishing it at Dryad. And so this is when I would have paused to say how many questions, but instead we will show a little bit about how it's been going so far. So we silently launched it a week before we announced it. And so 4 weeks later, what we've seen is that we've had 111 submissions where researchers use this feature, which is 12% of Dryad submissions. When I say that there's 24 of them published, it's because many and most of researchers that are coming to Dryad are using our private for peer review feature. So a lot of these are private at the moment, but we know that those will continue to move through the pipeline. But the most interesting part above the numbers is that when we've been combing through and trying to see how researchers have used it, wondering if maybe they would get confused or want more information, they've all used it in exactly the way that we would have expected, which is putting their R, their Python, their MATLAB code all at Zenodo with the data files at Dryad. So we're very thrilled with how well this has gone from the beginning, but we also want to keep tracking this and see how much we can start to incentivize researchers who traditionally only publish data to now publish their software. But we also know that this is just the beginning. So while this is very exciting and we're really proud of this work that we've done together, this is just the first step. And so we both work, Dryad and Zenodo, in agile iterative feature building mechanisms. And so we're thinking one step ahead. And we've built more features, but we are working through these researcher interviews to understand what is it that will make this a better service for researchers. And so we're thinking about the upload experience. We're thinking about supporting information files. So the other figures and images, a lot that have been going to Zenodo in the past, but a lot that have come to Dryad from journals that just really aren't data. We're also thinking about how to plug into publisher platforms. So be on the lookout for some exciting news from Dryad about our publisher integrations with platforms, eJournal Press and Editorial Manager, but making sure that this all flows so that researchers, we really do get to take away that burden of where should I go and how should I do it, but it's all plugged in and seamless. And this is all guided by our interviews with researchers and with folks in the community, publishers, software experts, et cetera. And so we want to make sure that all this is features that are going to be used. We're not doing this just to signal that we care about software. We want it to be something that is really beneficial to the research community. So we are looking to guide and grow these changes, and we don't want to do it in silos. So we're hoping that folks want to engage with us more and weighing in on what you've been hearing and what we can do to make this as useful as possible. And so with that, I'm going to pause. I saw that there were some chats.